There's so many new developments in the vintage gaming scene these days. Everything from RGB mods to EverDrives are giving fans new ways to play and preserve our games, and it keeps coming at such a staggering pace that it's kind of hard to keep up. One of the most interesting projects to come to light in recent months is the Super SD System 3 from TerraOnion. This add-on for the PC Engine family of consoles allows you to play HuCard ROMs and CD-ROM game images off an SD card while playing on real hardware. But in addition to that functionality, the Super SD System 3 also gives you access to RGB video output, all in one mod-free unit. Of course, I was pretty enthusiastic when I first heard about it. I couldn't wait to see what it was like. And thanks to TerraOnion, who sent us a unit, I can now take a deeper look at the Super SD System 3 and see what it's really capable of. Hailing from Spain, TerraOnion rose to fame thanks to the Neo SD, a flash cart for the Neo Geo AES and MVS hardware. In December of 2017, they confidently unveiled the Super SD System 3, or SSDS3 for short, which garnered a lot of interest right out of the gate. At nearly $300, what kind of value proposal does this thing have? To simply define the SSDS3 is a bit of a challenge because it wears a number of hats. It uses an FPGA and ARM processor to emulate not only the Super CD-ROM hardware, but the Super System and arcade cards which are needed to run CD-ROM games and more. It can then read CD disk images off a micro SD card. In addition, it can also load HuCard ROMs into memory, playing the base games for that format. In short, it's basically an optical drive emulator, a clone console, and flash cart all in one mod-free unit. And that's not even all of it. Encased in a smoky, translucent plastic, the SSDS3 connects to any console in the PC Engine family that has an expansion port in the back. The form factor allows it to slide seamlessly into place on any of the Japanese systems, while the US TurboGrafx 16 was a bit snug for my liking. I alleviated the stress on the plastic by loosening the screws a little bit, allowing it to split apart. It doesn't require any sort of external power, and is simply powered by the console itself. Adapting the video signal from the pins in the expansion port, the SSDS3 has a Sega Genesis 2 style mini DIN on the back of the unit, allowing for RGB and composite video output at the console's native 240p resolution. This functionality is on par with the graphics booster from DB Electronics, although that device cannot be used with a CD-ROM attached to the console. The first production run of the Super SD System 3 had a number of video issues, resulting in incompatibility with some RGB cables and lots of visible video noise. Thankfully, this was discovered and fixed before most of the sold units were in customers' hands. This new board revision does exhibit some noise in the video, but it's a massive improvement from the old version. Composite video, if you choose to use it, is about what you'd expect. It exhibits the usual attributes such as rainbowing and blurry edges. If you're a fan of this look, you won't be let down. You can also use the console's built-in AV or RF outputs if you'd like, but CD games won't have any audio. But if your goal is pristine video quality, then here's where things get a little bit complicated. Most users will either want to use a SCART cable for RGB or YPB-PR via the HD Retrovision component cables. If you go RGB, then you'll need a SCART cable specifically designed for the Sega Genesis 2. From there, you'll need to choose between C-Sync or Sync-on Composite. SCART cables that meet these specs can be purchased from the US-based Retro Access, as well as Retro Gaming Cables in the UK. Using a cable wired for C-Sync, I had a very faint hint of diagonal noise that was mostly wiped clean, as long as I was using a device equipped with a decent low-pass filter, such as the open-source scan converter. Sync-on Composite also displays a fairly clean signal with your typical checkerboarding that can appear if you have an unshielded cable. However, there is a bit of a caveat when it comes to this type of sync. More on that in a little bit. Although the Super SD System 3 is not officially supported, the HD Retrovision component cables will work in a plug-and-play fashion. Unfortunately, the diagonal pattern does become more visible across certain swaths of color, such as the Lords of Thunder opening cinema, and LPF will do nothing to hide that pattern. Outside of this, the image quality between RGB and component is basically identical, although you may need to adjust some color settings depending on what type of scaler or monitor you're using. Just be sure to have the contrast switch turned off, away from the sun icon on the component cables, or else your image will be overblown. Of course, the jail bars, which are inherent to the hardware of the PC Engine family, will be present here. They're just a fact of life for fans of the system, and there's just no getting around them unless you modify the innards of the console. The good news is they're virtually invisible on a CRT monitor. One final note on video quality. As we were going into production on this episode, it was discovered that the tantalum capacitor at location C60 on the PCB of the SSDS3 was mounted backwards. While this has no bearing if you are using C-Sync for sync, it could result in various issues over time, such as degraded video quality if you're using sync on composite or simply composite video. If you're handy with a soldering iron, this is super easy to fix. Heck, even I could do it with my limited experience. But if you want the best possible, cleanest picture with the SSDS3, then a SCART cable wired for C-Sync is definitely the way to go. Audio-wise, the SSDS3 outputs line-level audio and sounds great when playing HuCard games. There's a slight volume difference, but honestly to my ears, it's pretty negligible. CD games, however, can be a bit of a different story. Outside of a subtle pop in the audio that is sometimes audible when a CD track begins, I could tell that there was something weird about certain audio tracks. Putting the audio recorder from the SSDS3 and a Turbo Duo unit side by side confirmed that something was definitely up.
East, the ideal utopia. Once a country so peaceful and prosperous. A country where children were as free as the wind. A country where harmony blew through the hearts of all men.
Now, audio isn't exactly my forte, but thanks to some friends, we determined that there's an issue with the dynamic range of CDDA and ADPCM, which was causing some sort of distortion. You can easily see this in the opening of the Dynastic Hero. Take a look at the waveform of the audio.
I don't always know what to say, but now I must show.
We've been informed that TerraOnion is already working on a fix for this audio issue via future firmware update, which is a relief because this could be a complete deal breaker for some, considering that CD-ROM games are perhaps the main draw here. Alright, some people might not even care at all about the video output. I mean, the real selling point here is the ability to play some CD-ROM games off an SD card, right? Before powering on your system, you'll need to get some games on that micro SD card of yours. The Super SD System 3 can read both FAT32 and exFAT file formats, with the maximum supported size at 256 gigabytes. This is more than enough space to hold everything you can probably ever want. For HuCard games, the ROM dumps must be in the .PCE format. If you want to play one of the handful of Super Graphics games that exist, you'll need to have the SSDS3 attached to a Super Graphics console. When it comes to CD-ROM games, a number of formats are supported. .bin and Q are probably the most widely used, while the ISO plus Q plus wave rips you can generate using Nightwolf's free Turbo Rip application are also supported. Put each CD game's files in their own folder on the SD card. .PCE files can be sorted in folders if you want, but just dropping them into the root folder allows for easy access. Once these files are on your micro SD, insert it into the slot and boot the console without a game in it. If you do have a HuCard in the console, it'll run that game by default while making the system think there's a CD-ROM attached to it. This is handy for games that make use of the built-in save memory, like Dragon's Curse, but more on that a little bit later. After a short boot up screen, the LED on the side of the unit illuminates and you're faced with a pretty cool looking menu interface containing two tabs. Tab 1 is labeled HuCard and will show a list of all the .PCE files in the root directory of your SD card. If you decide to sort things into folders, these will be listed at the top of the list for you to navigate deeper. Press Run to make your selection. Hitting Select switches over to the CD-ROM tab. Here you'll see a list of CD games that you put on your card. Each game listed corresponds to the folder that the disk image was placed in. Once again, if you have some games in a subdirectory, select it and you'll be able to view them. Everything is perfectly functional as it is now, but I do wish you could use the 1 button to select the game or directory, and the 2 button would cancel or go up a level in the directory tree. Anyway, pressing the 2 button takes you to the option menu. Here you can enable and disable features, some of which might prevent certain games from running correctly. I think it's important that we skip to the bottom of this list first before talking about anything else, because it has a direct effect on the rest of the options. The Select CD-ROM System Card menu allows you to choose the BIOS file that the Super CD-ROM uses when booting a CD-based title. For the uninitiated, these system cards contain the code and RAM to boot the Super CD-ROM hardware. There were 4 released in total, with each card backwards compatible with the ones before it. The final Super System card was 3.0, which was also integrated internally into the Turbo Duo consoles. It's important to state that these BIOS files are still under copyright, so however you decide to obtain them is completely up to you. Once you have the BIOS files ready, you want to copy them into the directory on the SD card simply called BIOS. You'll choose from the list of files in that directory, and it's basically a one and done deal. Some games require certain cards to play, and if you don't have a high enough card version, then you get a unique splash screen or minigame. If you want to check those out, then just load a lower BIOS file than a game requires. Alright, back to the top of this list is the Boot Last Game toggle. If this is checked, whenever you power on the console without a game in it, the SSDS3 will automatically boot up the last game you were playing. This is pretty handy if you're going to be spending a lot of time with a specific game, but if you change your mind one day and want to play something else, just hold down the start button when powering on the system. I personally like to keep this turned off because you can quickly boot the last game played from the top of the menu anyways. Next up is the in-game trigger. If this is checked, you can conveniently return to the SSDS3's main menu by holding down Start and Select for several seconds during the game. While generally pretty useful, this option still needs some work and can cause some issues from game to game. It even gives you a warning when you choose to enable it. On a normal Turbo Duo console, if you turn it on without a game in it, you're taken to the Super CD-ROM splash screen, and then you press Run to start the game. Toggling the CD-ROM Press Run option makes it so the system just does this for you. Of course, you can't access the save file memory that way. Which brings us to the per game backup RAM option. Save game management can be a bit of a challenge with the PC Engine, with just a paltry 2 kilobytes to work with. If you have the per game option checked, the SSDS3 works around this limitation by making an individual 2K RAM sector for each game that you play, effectively giving you unlimited space. The save file will show up on the SD card in the BUP folder at the root directory and will sport the same name as the game image. Toggling this option off creates a single 2K file called backram.bup, which consists of the entire save file pool for that system. This will function just like a regular console, and you can delete game saves using the normal method via the CD-ROM BIOS menu. This in itself is a pretty killer feature, but what if you have game saves on a console you want to restore to the SSDS3? Well, if you have an item like the Tenekoe bank, you can do this in a pretty roundabout way. First, back the memory up to one of the 4 banks of the card, and boot the Tenekoe in your system with the SSDS3 connected to it, and load the card back into the system. This will create a backram.bup file on the SD card, which you can then duplicate and rename to match the file of your disk image. When you load up the game, the save file should be intact. Towards the end of the console's life, a final expansion card was released that had an additional 2 megabytes of memory, which enhances some games and is required for certain others. Probably the most well-known game to use this card is the ultra-expensive vertical shooter Sapphire, but a bunch of other games use it as well. The arcade card's functionality can be easily toggled in the menu, and I've just pretty much chose to leave it activated in case I was playing a game that needed it. However, if you seem to be experiencing some compatibility issues, try turning it off and seeing if that fixes the issue. After all that, how do the games actually play? I mean, that's what we're here for, right? Select the game you want to play from the menu and press Run to get started. You'll see the LED on the side of the unit illuminate and flash as it accesses the card. At times I could hear a kind of faint audio buzz come from the speakers as it was accessing the SD card. But this noise is drowned out as soon as the game audio kicks in. However, it may be audible on quieter moments during CD-ROM games. As a side note, I found the LED kinda handy because most of the consoles that the SSDS3 can be attached to have no built-in indicator to show that the console is turned on and running. Now, I won't accidentally leave the system on for a week. Now, HuCard games boot up especially quick, but even CD-ROM titles move pretty quickly as well. In fact, load times are cut down across the board, with games like Cosmic Fantasy II benefiting significantly from the shorter load times. Check it out.
Yahoo! you know. We haven't had such a good harvest of moruga nuts for many years.
Yes, this is a great harvest. Huh? Who's making that racket? Oh, it's Van. Sounds like he must be off to play somewhere again. Van!
Laura! Laura, what are you doing here?
It even eliminates the pauses in some games that occur when the game is loading a new audio track from the CD. But not everything is rosy here. Sherlock Holmes Volume 2 has some severe glitching with FMV playback, rendering it basically unplayable.
I haven't a clue as to who the lady or ladies in question might have been.
On the HuCard side of things, I ran into a number of glitches, like Dragon Spirit constantly resetting. Of course, other incompatibilities will probably crop up as the SSDS3 makes its way into more and more consumers' hands, and we hope that TerraOnion might be able to fix everything via firmware. I had a lot of fun checking out the hacks and homebrew available for the PC Engine, although the Mega Man NES conversion seems to glitch apart pretty quickly. On the CD-ROM side, ripping and patching in the fan translation to Ys 4, Dawn of Ys, worked great. This is absolutely must-play material, with voice acting and everything.
Hey Adolf, look, Asteria, we're almost there. It's been a while. Can you believe you've been gone for 2 years?
Despite some issues with hardware-related video quality, I think that the pros of the Super SD System 3 far outweigh the negatives. Some of the firmware level issues may have been ironed out by the time you're watching this video. Optical gaming hardware going solid state is one of the most important and exciting trends in vintage gaming today. With the challenges that lay ahead regarding older CD-ROM game tech and its increasingly deteriorating mechanical nature, I'm glad that teams like TerraOnion are coming up with devices for the long term. Now, can someone get on making something like this for the Sega CD?